The Smiling Human podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to experience more of these shows into the future, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Hello, and welcome to The Smiling Human, where collectively we evolve through inquiry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Smiling Human podcast. My name is Oak Mountain, and today is a special episode. It's an episode that falls outside of our regular season cadence. This is because over the last month, I met someone very inspiring who I wanted to share with you in a timely manner. That person is Crystal McIntyre. Crystal McIntyre is a multi-passionate human design expert, coach, and illustrator, and author. With a deep understanding of the human design system and a knack for visual storytelling, Crystal teaches her clients how to trust themselves and empowers them to choose life over logic so that they can walk confidently into the life of their dreams. Now, this is a little bit of a different episode because we actually dive into some information and learning about this human design system. It's a system that I was at least vaguely familiar with and had used on occasion up to this point. And it's something that I think everyone could benefit from looking into, not necessarily adapting, but exploring with curiosity. I certainly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope the same for you. Excellent. Well, Crystal, I'm very excited to have you here on The Smiling Human. Thanks for agreeing to come on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So excited to drop in.
Yeah, what the listeners won't know is that we actually met as a result of a very serendipitous series of events. I had originally intended to fly out to Victoria in October, and my dear facilitator and dear friend Wesley Job, if you're listening, Wesley, I love you. He got sick the day that I was flying out, and I ended up taking an impromptu trip up to Squamish, where I was able to meet Crystal at her book launch, which we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming time here. But before we dive into all of the juicy golden goodness, I would love to ask you the question, Crystal, that I ask each guest at the head of the show. What's the last thing that made you smile?
I mean, my partner. He always makes me smile. We have so much fun together. We are so silly, and he just thinks I'm the funniest person alive. So that makes me feel amazing.
Hallelujah. That's excellent. That's excellent. So the listeners would have got a little sneak peek into your background and your expertise and a little bit about the exciting launch of your book, The Book of You, which is coming up right quick here.
Yes.
But for those listeners who have never heard of human design, have no idea what we're about to talk about, can you give us the intro, like the 101 for human design for the first-time listeners here?
Yeah. So some people might think of human design as like a self-help tool, a self-knowledge tool. I really like to think of it as a self-empowerment tool. It merges science and spirituality so beautifully and gives us a deeper understanding of what you could call your quantum energetic blueprint. So how are you designed to be in the world? It shows us it helps us understand how we're designed to be, and then we can see, oh, I'm not living that way. How am I not living that way because of my upbringing, societal programming, whatever? And we can start kind of unlayering and taking different steps, experimenting with things. What would happen if I did this different? So it combines some old technologies like astrology, the chakra system, the tree of life, the I Ching, and it gives us very practical tools that we can experiment with and start empowering our lives to change and to live as, to live the life of our dreams. I think so many of us are unsure of how to get where we want to go or even why we want to go there. And this helps us to understand that.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how this is one of the newer holistic interpretive systems for we might say human psychology or human purpose. And I think that the draw towards things like astrology or I Ching or human design, or even something like the Myers-Briggs and personality types, is all in an endeavor to better understand how we are made. Not
Mm-hmm.
how we come to be, but what it is that is qualitatively unique about each individual. And for the listeners, I have been, I don't know, engaging with human design for maybe 5 or 6 years in different degrees. But I remember the very first time I read my own chart, I had turned to the person who introduced it to me and I said, the only thing missing from this is my name, because the accuracy was so astonishing.
Yeah.
And I had never seen that. There's sort of, I've encountered vagaries with astrological readings or, tarot or these different things where it's like, that could apply to anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, the accumulation and the specificity that I encountered in the human design reading was something that set it apart. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe if you could share with us, because I know that there's different design types. And
Mm-hmm.
so people are sort of put into these maybe categories, as we could say, but they're less restrictive. And I know we talked a little bit about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
could you introduce us to that? And then we can explore maybe how that's applied.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always like to remind people that human design is not a box that you're here to fit into. It's an experiment for liberated living. And so you learn these things about yourself and then you look at, okay, how am I living that way? How am I living differently? And how could I imagine it would feel to live in that other way? Because it's all about resonance, right? It's like, wow, this resonates so deeply with something inside of me. Like, this is who I know that I'm here to be. And yet I'm acting in this other way because of my upbringing or fear, whatever. So with human design, it goes so deep. Like, there are layers that I have yet to really explore because of the depth to which you can take it. But we always want to start with the foundations. Obviously, you can't build a house from the top down. And so when we're looking at human design, we're looking at the energy types. So there are five, technically four and a half different energy types. So we have generators, which are the builders of the world. They're here to bring things into creation. We have the manifesting generators, which are kind of a subsection of generators. And they're very similar, although I'm a manifesting generator. We're kind of here for more step skipping and to show the limitless potential available to us all. Projectors, which I know is what you are like the new age guides. So, where manifesting generators and generators, their kind of existential question is, who am I? The projector's existential question is, who are you? Projectors have a very unique way of seeing other people, and they're really here to guide people with that unique way of seeing. We have manifestors who are the visionaries. They are so forward thinking in life, and they often need to like rein it back in. Their existential question is like, where am I going? Like, what am I working towards? And then we have reflectors who make up only 1% of the population, and they're really here to reflect back to us the health of our communities and to just be in flow with life, and to be they are here to kind of also be leading us into new ways of being.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for that clear and concise overview. I love that you've delivered this line a couple times when we've been speaking, which is the human design as an experiment in liberated living. And I think that this is something I really wanted to emphasize and perhaps even open up a little bit in the dialogue, because in a lot of cases, and I mean, you mentioned the projector is the new age guide. I used to work at a store called New Age. I've since sort of moved away into different aspects of thinking, but the idea that there's sort of a core structure that underlies a lot of these, I don't want to call them ideologies, but these thinking systems where people are like, oh, of course they did that, they're a Gemini, or there's these types of very restrictive box like apparatuses that almost feel like if we don't subscribe to them, we can't get any value from the system at all. And
Mhm.
so when I've heard you speaking about human design as an experiment, it really got me curious. My scientific mind is curious about that because it also evokes the sense of an invitation to say
Mm-hmm.
that there's a map put out before us based on this holistic convergence of things that are tied into this universal field.
Mm.
Have a look at it. What
Mm-hmm.
does it look like to engage with it? It's not that you have to be or ought to be or are bound and convicted to be any of these particular things, but in engaging with it as a choose your own adventure and also recognize where you are at the same time,
Yeah.
it's a very, very powerful piece. And so I wonder if you could elucidate for me and for the listeners, what different elements might they discover that can serve as these different channels of experimentation?
Mm. Ooh, I love this question. First and foremost, how to make decisions, how to trust yourself. This is, we've been conditioned to go with the most logical choice, but the mind only knows the present and backwards. So the mind has no idea where we're being guided. That's the body's job, the soul's job. And human design helps you understand, how am I, uniquely me, Crystal or Oak, designed to make decisions. So I can stop trying to do what's logical. I can stop asking people for advice. I can stop letting my mind be in control and come back into the truth, because oftentimes it's the illogical thing. In my business, my tagline is life over logic. How do we start engaging with life versus like, oh, well, this is what my mind thinks I have to do because that's what worked for me in the past. That's what I did in the past. Or, oh, no, I can't do that because I did it in the past and it didn't work out. And so, yeah, that's one of the biggest things I love about human design is it gives us an understanding of, how am I designed to be in relationship with this part of me? How is it speaking to me? And from there, it offers us signposts. How do I know when I'm in alignment? And how do I know when I'm veering off so that I can correct course? Because it's not about being in alignment all the time. That's, that study they did where they grew trees inside, and they found that the trunks couldn't support the tree as it grew because there was no wind to reinforce the strength of the trunk. It's the same thing with our alignment. I can't be in alignment all the time because actually I learn how to be in deeper alignment by going out of alignment and bumping into that wall and coming back, being like, okay, that didn't work out the way I expected. And I think it's the same thing with trust, but almost, what can happen is, as we grow, we aren't taught how to trust ourselves. And so we have to come back into that relationship. And in order to do that, we have to allow ourselves to make mistakes. The amount of times I've been like, oh yeah, I did that thing again because I was listening to my mind. I was choosing logic over life and living and vibrancy and pleasure and joy because of expectation, because of whatever, because of my conditioning. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, if nothing else you explore in human design, I invite you to explore your authority and your strategy, because that is your map. That is how life is guiding you.
Brilliant. I have one piece to touch on, the life over logic piece, and then the aspect of the authority piece is interesting because something happened to me over the weekend that I think you'll probably get a real kick out
Mm.
of in terms of authority. So life over logic is interesting. You find yourself on a show hosted by a self-proclaimed applied philosopher. Obviously, logic is something that I engage with often, but there's also a quote that I think is really important to remember, that the heart has reason that reason knows not.
Mm.
The
Mm-hmm.
heart has reason that reason knows not. And why this is so important is because in a lot of the mentorship work I do, obviously I'm not working explicitly with the human design system, but it's come in from time to time because of its
Mm-hmm.
relevance. Recognizing that there is an intrinsic depth of wisdom to the body in how we're made up, in our genetic coding, in our expression, as well as in the conditioned patterning that we've taken in that constitutes our learning and knowledge, that supersedes what the mind recognizes as what it knows. That is to say, when we say something like, I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know, that's the key piece where logic actually falls out. Because when we're working in this very logical, very rational A plus B equals C type of mentality, we're assuming that all of the information we have about A is all of the information that there could be about A, and that what we know about it is right. And that if it was in conjunction with B, and we assume all those same things about B, that we would get an accurate answer.
Right.
And fair enough, but likely? No, definitely not. There is an intelligence that supersedes the efficacy of logic that I might call primal wisdom. And this is where I'm going to bridge to the story about authority. Primal wisdom we might call instinct, right? Or sort of an intuitive ancestral knowledge that's baked into the body. I say baked, I just had a muffin earlier. I'm still thinking about it. And my authority is splenic, which in the human design system is instincts. It's this sort of immediate, one-off, clear message. There's no repeating. It's not in my lower. It's not like a or a It's not sort of visionary. It is deeply organic and visceral. And the story I'll offer you here, I think that human design really had supported me over this weekend in a way that I had not expected. So the other night I was sitting in a cul-de-sac in my car listening to a philosophical lecture, as I do from time to time. And I was writing some commentary and working out some ideas and some contemplations, just really at the edge of what feels like mind and spirit, where the investigation and the inquiry for me is right at the edge of faith. It's this blending of thought and experience and presence, and it's just a very special and sacred place for me to draw creative energy from. And from time to time, people will come and park there as well, but often when there's a single car parked, they'll just turn around and leave. Okay, so a couple cars go by over the half an hour that I'm listening to it, and then these two cars roll up, and they take a little detour, but rather than coming into the cul-de-sac, they turn around. But when I saw the cars, Crystal, my whole body said, get the hell out of there right now. Full body, tip to tail, activation. You need to leave immediately. This doesn't happen to me very often, but my whole body screamed, get out. So I, without hesitation, grabbed my keys, slammed them into the ignition, and just peeled out. That could be the end of the story, but it gets weirder, because those cars then rip out of where they were and start following me home.
Oh, wow.
And so I am driving. Yeah, I know. And I live in a beautiful neighborhood. I know my neighbors. There's schools. We had trick-or-treaters out. It's a very safe place. These things don't happen around where I am. And as this was happening, I was compelled, almost moved, possessed to sing, which is a very interesting thing to happen. And I was singing the same kind of sort of affirmative, truthful, philosophical expression of my being out into the world as this very fearful situation was taking over. I'm being tailed and chased by these strangers for whatever reason after I had this very strong instinctual call to leave. I made it home safe. They did go around the block a few times and were revving their engines and doing all sorts of weird things. But the moral of the story was I had a fraction of a second in that moment where that came online. And I literally thought to myself, Crystal, this is instinct. This is the authority. Listen. And I would not have known to trust that so deeply and to have this effective response, intuitive, if you want to call it, instinctual, if you want to call it, had I not been exposed to what is, well, human design, but also my own blueprint, so to say.
Yeah. Wow. And the splenic
Have you had experiences like that? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to touch on the splenic authority because it's the oldest awareness center. And so it is that instinct to survive. It's the hairs on your arm standing up. It's you're doing something and suddenly you look up because some part of you, it's not the mind, it's the body sensing beyond. And that, like you said, it's in the moment. And so I always use the analogy, if you're driving somewhere and you get to a stoplight, you drive the same way all the time. You get to a stoplight and that little voice is like, turn right here. Oftentimes fear comes up with the spleen, because it's intuition and fear. And so, this, if we're using this analogy, the first thought is, oh, I don't want to turn right. I'm going to get home late then. That's going to take 10 minutes later to get home. So you go straight, get stuck in traffic for an hour. And so anytime you can think, I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done that, because you didn't listen to that little voice, that's that voice speaking to you. And it speaks in the moment. So the next day, if I get to the same light and I turn right, it was in the moment. And so learning to trust that voice is so important. And, even with your share, it's like, okay, it got crazy. They were tailing you. What the heck? But we also don't know what would have happened if you would have stayed. And so it's like, because you trusted that voice, you got home safe. You got home, it's like, we don't know. And so the goal with the splenic authority is to notice in the past any times, and you'll remember these because you'll have those like, oh, that time I knew I heard that voice that time and I didn't do the thing it said. But then there's the times where you listen to it and you just, oh, I turned right here. I got home 10 minutes later. I didn't even look at the fact that there was a traffic jam. I just did my thing. And so the more that we trust that voice, the louder it gets. And it's going to speak very loud when you're in actual danger. But we also have to trust those moments where it's just the turn right here. And you're like, why? Well, maybe there's going to be a farm stand and you're going to stop and you're going to start talking to the farmer. And then suddenly this thing that you've been trying to figure out with your mind, he says something and you're like, oh, there we go. That's why I turned right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And loud it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it was so convincing. Maybe we could, if you would, elucidate the different types of authorities, and then I would love to know what yours is and maybe a story about how you've learned to align with it.
Oh, yes. So the authorities go in a specific order. And so you're kind of knocking them off. So if I'm not this, then I look to the next one. If I'm not that, then I look to the next one. And this is really only if you are like curious about being able to look at a chart and see, if you download your chart, it will just automatically say. So the first is the emotional authority. 50% of the population has this center defined. I'm an emotional authority. So emotional authorities are here to understand themselves and life through their emotional experience. This can feel really challenging because we're often told that we're overly emotional, especially as children. These are children that have emotional outbursts for no reason at all, which can be both of high joy, excitement, to sadness and anger. Now, the emotional authority is similar to like a flower. So if not similar to a flower, it's like, I'm going to photograph this flower. The emotional authority is asking you, okay, at dawn, how does it look with the dew on it? Okay, I'm getting curious about it. Okay, high noon, beating sun. Oh, wow. Has it shifted in some way? What's changed about it? Okay, right before dusk, as the sun is setting, it's pouring rain. Like, we're here to explore ourselves, get really curious about ourselves and our emotions. The biggest thing emotional authorities need to explore is the beliefs and thoughts that our emotions start to embed in us. Because we start thinking, oh yeah, I am too emotional. I am too much. I'm in a low right now. And instead of just observing myself, oh wow, Crystal is feeling very sad today. Oh wow, when she's in this state, she thinks her business is failing. She's not good enough to even be showing up. What patterns do I start? Where do I go to avoid this feeling or this discomfort? When I'm in a high, oh my gosh, she's ready to sell everything and invest it in this thing. And so the more that we can understand ourselves through our emotions without allowing our emotions to create or to impact our decisions, that's the key. Because often emotional authorities jump into things in a high where we've got the excitement. That excitement is bringing dreams and hopes and possibilities. And I'll use my partner and I invest in crypto, and you can always, it's like, well, if this goes to this, then we're set for life. It's like that's the emotional authority in its heightened state. In the lower state, it's like, no, I'm not good enough for this. So the opportunities that might come to us, we might say no because of our lower emotional state. And so the goal with the emotional authority is to allow yourself to dream and hope and notice what comes up, notice what fears and doubts come up in the low, and then find that calm, that place of calm where you're not basing it's no longer about the highs, the possibilities, or the lows. It's now coming back to like the body and what actually feels true, which is hard because emotional authorities oftentimes it can be uncomfortable being in a neutral emotional state because we're so used to this fluctuation, and we start thinking like, oh wait, is this a low? Am I not? What am I feeling right now? And really it's like the calm. Then we have the sacral authority. So this is any generator or manifesting generator. So even if you're an emotional authority and you're a generator or manifesting generator, you still want to understand the sacral authority because it's the thing responding. And it's either responding with an energy that's being pulled towards you, it's expansive, it's still going to feel safe. This is the thing about the authority. Your authority is not leading you into danger. With the example of your story, it's leading you to what's next in your life. And so when you might read the sacral authority as like, what am I excited by? But excitement is an emotion, so we want to be really careful with that. We want to feel it. Your authority will always feel safe, grounded, calm. There doesn't, even though the sacral authority, there is more of a rush because it is based a lot on instinct and what's currently happening in the environment. But every other authority, it's like, okay, let me just take a breath here. And even for you, it's like, it still needs to be calm. Like if you're like freaking out and you're trying to get the keys in and they're not going in and then panic starts setting in, we still want to like, okay, let me take a breath. My authority has alerted me to something. I'm going to do it. But I don't necessarily need to like ruin myself in the process. So with all authorities, like the action might have fear around it. Oh my gosh, I've never done this before. This is kind of scary. But the decision is safe. It's calm. It's grounded. And so that's with the sacral authority. It's not about, am I excited by this? Because not everything that's right for you is going to be exciting for you. And so we want to understand that. But you have to feel into like, what does a yes feel like? What does this being pulled towards feel like? This expansion. It is very energy based. It's very body based. It's that gut feeling. What does a no feel like? And then we explore deeper because am I saying yes to this out of obligation, out of expectation, or because it's actually true for me? So there's so much nuance that we need to understand. And that's why I truly believe your authority is the greatest relationship that you can invest your time and energy into understanding. Then we have the splenic authority, which we spoke to. That is intuition, instinct. Often fear comes up because they're kind of two sides of the same coin. I like to say, fear is not the obstacle, it's showing you the path. And yes, sometimes it is, like in your case, it was like, oh, okay. But oftentimes our intuition, it feels scary because it's new. We're driving without a map and we're just trusting the GPS, which is our authority. And then we have the mind in the back seat who's freaking out because it basically can only see sideways and backwards, and it's trying to backseat drive. And so we've got this inner conflict between the mind trying to be like, no, 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 no. And the body, even if we use your experience, the mind being like, let me flash all the murder shows you've ever watched in your mind right now. And your soul's just like, let's just take a breath. Let's just put the keys in the ignition and let's drive out of here. So the splenic authority it's that in the moment. And it really is, I would say, the only one that you want to be listening to in the moment. The sacral, if it's a yes today, it's going to be a yes tomorrow. Like, it's not life or death. The spleen is really like, hey, let's do this now. Then we have the ego. And ego is the heart. And it's all around desire. And this one is connected through speaking. And so it's what do I desire? This authority can seem very selfish because we're taught to be selfless. And so it's what do I desire? What do I need? What do I want? And the more that you can understand this authority and align with it, you start recognizing that what you give to yourself actually benefits those around you. Then we have self-projected. This is only projectors can have this authority. And this is an inner knowing. It's that I know I need to do this, but I don't know why. And I can't explain it to anyone. So if they ask me, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So it can be a challenging authority because it requires a lot of trust and like really being okay, being like, I don't know, but I need to do this. And so it comes from that inner knowing, and it's connected to the throat. And so it's speaking, really like listening to what you're saying, listening to how you're speaking about things. Then we have the mental projectors. And so this is a unique authority because it does involve the mind. So mental projectors need to gather information, which is what the mind does best, taking in information, noticing patterns, connecting dots. So it needs to take in information about the decision, but then it needs to speak, and either with someone who isn't going to give you their opinion, but is instead going to be a sounding board. This is technically, other terms are sounding board authority, because what you're looking for is someone to say, wow, your voice changed when you're talking about this. Talk about it a bit more. Oh, wow, your whole energy changed with that. Are you sure? Like, that, I'm really noticing your energy drop as you're speaking about this, and I'm noticing you're going back into your mind, into rationalizing, into your pros and cons list. Let's talk about the other one again. How does that feel in your body? If you don't have someone you can do that with, you can voice record yourself and just let yourself speak about them. So again, it requires the mind, but the mind's not making the decision. The body's listening to what it's speaking, and from there you find the resonance of truth. And the last one is the lunar authority, which is only connected to reflectors. This one comes in cycles. And so with traditional human design, what you'll read or hear is like you're supposed to follow the cycle of the moon. Now, it's not the cycle of like full moon, new moon, waxing moon, waning moon. It's the cycle of the moon as it moves through the gates of human design. That, to me, feels very heady and feels like it feels like too much, and I'm not a reflector, but that feels like too much. What I invite reflectors to do is to reflect. So at the end of the day, reflect, what was my energy like? Who was I around? Who was I being? Do I like who I was being? Reflect on your day, and you'll start to notice a pattern, because there will be these moments where you feel very clear, and that's the space you're looking for. So reflectors, it's said that they need 28 days to make a decision, but what you really need is to give yourself a few months to find your unique cycle so that you can see the spaces where clarity will inevitably be there. And it's, I know reflectors who have made decisions in the moment and they've been amazing. And so it's again, the more that you can trust yourself, the easier it becomes to make decisions. And we stop being in the head because we trust what the body is saying. That was a lot.
That's great. I deeply appreciate the thoroughness with which you have expounded these ideas. And I think the core piece that comes forward in listening is that the strategy supports the cultivation of self-trust.
Yes.
And this is why the experimentation is so powerful. So to the listener, I'd invite you in this moment, if you know what your authority is, or if you don't, maybe, let's put it this way, if you don't know what your authority is, which one of those resonated with you? Have a listen, maybe have a re-listen, and tune in and note down which one felt most resonant, and we will come back with the second half of the show.
Yay.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about just how you can help this show grow into the future. Did you know that we have an Instagram, a YouTube, and a Patreon? Probably. But if you're listening on YouTube, like many of you are, I would invite you to subscribe, to like this video if you've enjoyed it, and to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions or maybe guests that you want me to interview. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or any other podcast platform, then please take this moment to rate the show. All of these actions go a long way to helping the Smiling Human podcast reach more people and grow into the future. Thank you so much. Great. Well, we're back for the second half now, Crystal, which means we are starting the section, the question of the week. This is where I invite our guests to bring forward an inquiry that's meaningful to them, something that they might want to showcase to the audience, or perhaps something they want me to comment on. So, Crystal, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, since we were speaking about trust, and because that's such a big part of why I feel like I'm here in this life, I would love your thoughts on what you think could be possible if we were taught, and if we taught our children how to trust themselves from a young age.
The first thing that comes to mind is that our understanding of our place in the universe would clarify. So I think that we'd have a greater sense of belonging. And I can walk us through how I got from trust to belonging. When I look at babes, the very, very young, there's no doubt. They're just being. They're responsive expressions of life and consciousness. And even to the extent that I've seen parents who have been, or rather children who have been parented by very conscious and conscientious, loving individuals, there's this innate essence, this natural wisdom. We talked about primal wisdom before. There is this innate wisdom that's allowed to come forward. And I think that when we follow that wisdom inwards, when we actually sort of trace that back and go, what does it say about me that this is the case? What does it say about the world that this wisdom is here? It actually places us in the context of creation. Because when we are able to recognize wisdom as innate, a primal wisdom or an intuitive wisdom, then we are simultaneously acknowledging the intelligence and wisdom of all life in the universe. And that immediately places us. And so when we're placed and we have a sense of belonging, that, just from a psychological perspective, supports the development of healthy individuals and healthy maturation all the way through life. Because we have a context. We're in a participatory and reciprocal, wanting, loving, receptive relationship with our environment. And that actually can start, just like what you're saying, by imbuing the child with the capacity to recognize their inherent trustworthiness.
I love that.
And I think too that the essence of trust and is it's what draws us to these kinds of systems at all. It's what draws us to learn, what draws us to understand. The only reason why, what's one distinguishing factor between bull crap and a really good idea, or a crap theory and something that's scientifically viable? It's that it can be trusted. It's replicatable over time when applied. And so we trust truth. And I think what's really powerful about your work in particular is that this is not just a reading, right? We sort of alluded to your upcoming book and
Mm-hmm.
the campaign that you're using to bring this out into the world. It's not just a reading, it's not just a chart, it's not just some sort of, oh yeah, here's 10 minutes worth of information, but what you've managed to distill is a physically instantiated opportunity for self-discovery of truth as well as a deeper knowing of other. And I think that that's really, really powerful. So I would love to hear how your intention that we've spoken to before about trust, about imbuing trust in others and for themselves, how that makes itself manifest in the unique offering that is your book.
Oh, first of all, I just want to come back to like trust is belonging because we the more that we trust ourselves, the more we find ourselves in situations with those who see us, who love us for who we are. And therefore we find belonging. And we stop seeking it because it just finds us. It's inside of us, but we don't allow it to express because we don't trust ourselves to hold it or to be in the situations that bring it out. And so I love that you really connected those two. Oh, the book of you. I am just obsessed with this thing and trusting, my own authority to bring it out and just following the little breadcrumbs. If I would have known 2 years ago when I just started creating these PDFs for everyone that I did a reading for, and then being like, wow, I've compiled all of this written content, what would happen if I just put it in a PDF? And then that was just knowledge. And from there I was like, how do I take this knowledge and create the ability for people to experiment with it? Because human design is so logical, it's such a heady system, you can really get lost in it, which was part of my experience. I was like, wow, I know all this human design stuff, but nothing in my life is changing because I didn't actually know how to apply it. And so now I've taken the information. So the book of you contains all of the information that your chart has. It's very in depth, but then it also gives you questions to ask yourself. So am I in alignment? Am I noticing that I'm out of alignment? Or what are these little tweaks that I could make just off these questions that I'm reflecting on? Then we have experiments. The biggest one is the experiment to trust your authority. So that is a deep understanding of your authority and a 30-day experiment to start playing around with it. And the funny thing is like I'm in the editing phase of the book, but with that I just keep adding more. So right now it's like 150 pages specific to you. So you enter in your birth information and you get a book, a physical hard copy book that is specific to you and your design. So no two books will be alike. This is your map, your resource that ultimately I hope that you look at throughout your life, reflect on it, just even, turning to a page, reading it and being like, okay, am I in alignment here? Where could I be going out of alignment? And so yeah, by the end of this, who knows how many pages it'll be by the end, because I am just obsessed with making it as easy to understand and experiment with as possible so that you can see for yourself what happens, like what could change in my life if I tried these things. And from there, my goal is to break it into making it for children, for parents, a resource for parents to understand and support their child as they grow. Because there are a lot of conscious parents out there who, a lot of us have done the work to explore, how did my childhood, whether good, bad, whatever, how did it impact who I am today? And how do I give my children the best chance at thriving in life?
Hmm. I want to emphasize for the listener that Crystal's book is not just a book about human design, but it is a specific printing that is literally your own. And so if that wasn't clear, the book is literally the book of you, which I love the title of, because it means that you're not going to be subject to just generic information or having to distill something for yourself. The applicability and invitation into experimentation is explicitly your own. And I think that for anyone who is empowered, curious, even just moderately interested in this particular system, the wealth and opportunity that exists inside such a personalized reflection can't be understated. And when you're speaking to bringing this in for parents, I wonder if you could speak a bit to how else having such a book could be useful. Because obviously it's useful to ourselves. We talked about the utility of self trust, of self understanding. But I imagine that this kind of revelation and this sort of insight is applicable in different areas of life.
Oh my gosh, yes. Friendship, relationship. You know, when I first met my partner and I pulled up his human design chart, I noticed the difference between, we both have a defined throat center, but what it was connected to. So mine is connected to my emotional center. I'm really here to speak about my feelings. What am I feeling? Understanding myself through that. What am I experiencing? He's here to speak about his desires, and he speaks it from his G center, which is to gain a deeper understanding. And so when we first started dating, and I noticed he would speak kind of not in circles, but like repeating things. And at first I was like, wow, does he think I'm an idiot? And then through my knowledge of human design, I was like, oh no, he is speaking to gain his own clarity. And so it's not, I just get to be here to help him do that. And so there's 9 energy centers, and whether you have them colored in, that's defined, they're outputting energy. You have them white, they're drawing energy in. So when we're in any sort of relationship, friendship, romantic partnership, coworker, parent child, these centers are interacting. So when we can understand how they're actually impacting each other, we can start to kind of like understand the relationship and maybe the challenges that occur. My partner and I both have undefined root centers. The root center gives you energy where like time is a pressure. So like we're not good at rushing each other. If we try and rush each other, it's chaos because we don't have the energy to give for that. So we just kind of fall into like conflict and chaos. So we try really hard to be like, okay, like we don't want to get into a fight. We're leaving for the airport. What do we need to put in place prior to this? Because that energy is not going to serve us because we don't have it to support us in this. So what do we look to? What other areas of our chart do we look to support us in this? I think human design for relationships it is it goes beyond, because once we know ourselves, then we can start knowing the other. And that's why I think it's huge and so valuable for parent and children dynamics.
Mm-hmm. I know that there's a taboo in other systems around having a reading for a child prior to the age of reason, which is about 7 years old. Is there
Mm,
any sort of aspects of this within human design in terms of not placing them in the box, or what is the relationship with this system of understanding and the developmental phases of children?
yeah. Curiosity. So, okay,
Hmm.
if my child is a projector, what am I noticing? What is their energy like? My one of my best friends has an 8-year-old who is a mental projector. So not a lot of physical body energy. And that girl can, you see it. She's so analytical. She's so smart. She's so creative. She could sit for hours and just draw or read. But you go on a 10-minute hike and she's exhausted. And my friend was like, if I didn't know this, I would think there's something wrong with her. But because we just get to be curious. And so it's not you, oh, my child, this child's a generator and this child's a projector. So this child has a lot of energy and this child has none. It's what am I noticing? What am I seeing? Oh, wow, my child actually has way more energy in the morning. Okay, amazing. Or, oh, wow, okay, yeah, I definitely see my generator child. That kid just wants to be outside running around, and my projector child is happy to just sit and read a book. Okay, amazing. Now I get to understand, like, how do I support them in this? And, I think the thing about childhood is you're still the parent. You can't, oh, my child's a manifester, so they know how to parent themselves. Like, well, actually, they need to learn how to ask for permission so that later in life they learn that they don't need to ask for permission. It's a weird kind of balance. But I think that human design can really support conscious parents because we have all of this knowledge about like our own childhood and like, hey, my mom had to eat everything on her plate. So as a child, I didn't have to do that because my mom was like, I'm not doing that for my children. And so it's like, how do we take our own upbringing and instead of swinging the pendulum so far, how do we just get curious about these little beings that we have who we're noticing that they are, who we kind of want them to be, because let's be honest, as a parent, there's definitely gonna be like, oh, I played football, I want my kid to play football. We're gonna want to do that. Can we come back to self and be like, oh, where's that coming from? And how do we support our children to then trust themselves? And so I think it's a combination of both the understanding of childhood development and really just spending those first 7, 8, 10 years just getting really curious about who your child is showing themselves to be and who, I have people that are buying the book for their children because you can start to see, like, okay, how are they designed to make decisions? What might I notice about their energy? What centers do they have defined and what do I have defined? How are we the same? How are we different? What natural gifts might they be bringing to the world? Am I noticing that about them? And so, yeah, it's not a box. It's a curiosity. It's let me get as curious as I can with the information that I have and just see, like, how is this lining up?
Mm. It sounds like this, and I might place it among other systems, provides a meaningful menu
Mm,
of investigative points where it's like,
mhm,
okay, yeah, what am I noticing? The proclivities might be this. It could be that they're going to be this way. They
mhm,
might have interest in these things given the astrological, given um, the human design, given the Myers Briggs or the Big Five, whatever we're using to
mhm,
assess what kind of person they're going to be. And I think that, from my perspective, marks a very meaningful middle ground. A middle
mm,
ground between the dictatorial, this is how we want our children to be, this is who you're supposed to be, this
yeah.
is what you're going to be, versus, oh, I don't know, they're a free spirit, allow them to do as they will, and I'm not going to crush their spirits by interfering at all. It's like, well, as a parent, we have an absolute and explicit role of guiding, of teaching, and being
Mhm,
a substitute frontal lobe, because those little beings don't have that online yet. And so the
yeah.
decision making, the guidance, and the influence doesn't have to be tyrannical and strict as we have seen in a lot of different generations. And it can't be, in my personal opinion, quite as liberal as we're seeing the pendulum swing at
Yes.
present. And so having numerous different methodologies to inform us of what might be going on
Mhm,
offers an opportunity to experience the reflection of what's being lived and what could be, and
mhm,
how to steward the child through that. So I think that that's an incredibly powerful piece, and that curiosity being at the center of that makes perfect sense.
mhm.
Now, for those who have kids, or for those who are just curious about the book of you, curious about human design, inspired by your words or the stories here, Crystal, can you let the people know where they can get in touch with you, how they can find you, and what's going on in your world?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram Crystal McIntyre, and that's where I hang out a lot. The Book of You is currently in a crowdfunding. I really wanted to play with, I'm a 1-3. I wanted to see if I could, what it's like, learning through experimentation. So I've done a crowdfunding. It ends at the beginning of December, but the book will be available ongoing. And yeah, I think those are the only two questions that you asked. Where do I hang out and where can you find the book? So I think that will be linked. It's an Indiegogo. There are some amazing rewards. It's currently marked at 33% off. You can do a reading and book combination. I also have the best deal is doing I think it's 4-week intensive with me where we really dive in to how to start living in alignment. This is great for anyone that loves support or is currently moving through something and feeling like, wow, I'm just not living my best life, I feel like, and I don't know what to do. So yeah, those are, I think, yeah.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
as always, all of the information will be present in the show notes and the description. You can check out the Indiegogo. It'll be up for, well, as Crystal mentioned, until the beginning of December. So you've got about a week as of the time of airing to be able to dive into that. And definitely check out Crystal's posts. She's a little beam of light on the internet there. And
Thanks.
with that, Crystal, thank you so much for sharing and for bringing such illuminating and uplifting information around your passion and human design.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been, such a delight. I love talking about human design and I love connecting with new people about it. So thank you.
And that concludes this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to receive a free gift. I've created a free insight journal. This is a 30-day self-reflection and introspection journal that you can download at no cost in the description below. Go have a look and join the journey. The second invitation I have for you is, if it feels within your means and possible for you, then please head over to patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Becoming a patron will give you access to perks like behind-the-scenes footage and access to live Q&As with me monthly. You also get voting privileges to help pick new guests or to help guide other episode content. Truly, the support of listeners like you, paid or unpaid, goes a long way. So if you could like, share, subscribe, and give a rating on the podcast app, all of that goes a long way. Thank you to each and every one of you who's been on this journey with me. See you again soon.